Welcome to the Data Room, where we share best practices and actionable tips on being a data-driven company, or as we call it, data first. If you're a B2B revenue leader looking to scale your growth stage business, come and join experienced CEO and tech founder Scott Stouffer in the Data Room. Welcome to another episode of the Data Room. I am Heather Kitos here with scaleMatters CEO and co-founder Scott Stouffer. We've talked a little bit about data integrity in the past, so today we're going to focus on data infrastructure. Let's really get into the nitty-gritty. Scott, if you're a revenue leader, what do you need to have in place to have high quality data integrity in terms of an infrastructure?
Yeah, so when we think of companies that we see that are particularly good at leveraging data to be exceptional at acquiring customers or acquiring revenue, they kind of view their data infrastructure in a bit of a layered fashion. The very first part, the part without which nothing else matters, is you have to have good data. Because there's no point in visualizing, analyzing, or acting upon data if it's not good. And good means accurate, high integrity, not data anomalies and problems, et cetera. And so at this bottom part of this infrastructure, which is what gives you good data, there's really three parts. First is a data model, and you've heard us talk about that before. And the data model is effectively what are all of the things that we need to measure in order to be able to inform decision makers so that they can make the right decisions at the right time and manage the whole customer or revenue acquisition engine with a lot more precision than they otherwise would do. And you could think of, if you thought of customer acquisition like a factory floor and there's a bunch of robotics and machines out there, you could think about the data model as what are all the sensors that we're putting on the factory machines so that they actually measure everything appropriately. And these could be things like stuff from website conversion rate, right? What percentage of people are coming in on the website that are actually converting and filling out forms and becoming a lead. It could be more qualitative stuff like what are the profiles of the prospects that we're bringing in, because we need to understand that so that we can get more precise in our targeting, et cetera. So the first part is you have to have a data model, which is a bunch of things you measure. It's an understanding of the relationships between the things that you measure. The second part is kind of core, which is how does that data model get implemented? It gets implemented on the tech stack. So we all know about the CRM, Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever CRM you're using, whatever marketing automation platform, Pardot, HubSpot, Marketo, et cetera. Enablement tools like SalesLoft and Outreach. Conversation analytics tools like Gong or Chorus. These are all kind of parts of the customer acquisition tech stack. The data model or the sensors are typically implemented on the pieces of the tech stack. And then the third part of this core underlying infrastructure to give you good data is what we would call a data integrity layer. And what we're trying to get at there is the biggest difference between companies that are good at this and companies that aren't is the quality of their data. And companies that are good at this take that data quality or data hygiene or data integrity thing really, really seriously. And so that layer includes different things. There's some cultural attributes, right, such as basically demanding that our data be good and putting in accountability mechanisms to make sure that people are taking the right steps and the right actions to make sure the data is good. So potentially salespeople potentially having some level of compensation element that rewards them for working in the CRM in the way that the company wants them to, as opposed to being very scattershot and inconsistent. So there's a cultural aspect. There's also a whole set of guardrails that can be put in place. So if you think about Salesforce as an example, as a CRM, if you really set this up properly, you can build these guardrails that sort of prevent bad things from happening to the data. So, for example, we've talked before about sort of this excessive burden we put on salespeople to capture a whole lot of information and then put it into the CRM. Well, by definition, if you're relying on humans, there's going to be issues, right? And so to the extent that we can provide these guardrails that sort of help ensure that the salesperson navigates his or her way through the CRM in the way that we need them to so that the data quality is maintained, that's a good thing. Even better, we can build automations that remove the need altogether for human interaction. So, for example, we talked about prospect profile information, or maybe another thing that might come from a sales call is who are we competing against? Rather than relying on the sales team to capture all that and not miss it and then go put it in the CRM, you can configure these conversation intelligence tools like Gong or Chorus or some of their competitors in a way that capture this stuff automatically, right? So there's the ability exists now to create these automated ways of capturing data that basically eliminate some of the human behavior. So that's another example of data integrity layer. And then the last thing I'd talk about from a data integrity layer part of this whole data infrastructure is invariably you can't catch it all. There will be data anomalies that occur. And in the same vein as if you're a network monitoring center or a security monitoring center, you've got all this continuous monitoring going on looking for fault conditions. You can build the same thing into your sales and marketing tech stack where you configure it itself or you add some software itself in order to be looking for anomalous data so that you can expose that as soon as it happens and take corrective actions immediately such that what you're trying to avoid is people making bad decisions because they're making those decisions based on bad data. So it's very important to not let this stuff fester. And one way to do that is by putting in these continuous monitoring protocols that actually catch the stuff as it occurs.
That's really interesting. I love what you said about kind of like a factory floor and putting in sensors and all of that. When it comes to just building all of this infrastructure, it seems like a lot of people want to get to that last part, right? They want to be able to catch the data. They want to look at their data and just find the inefficiencies quickly without taking a step back and going into that underlying data model and making sure that the quality of data is good. So if you are kind of implementing this stuff, maybe you jump to the tech stack first, right, and the implementation. But would you say then that first part, that core foundation of a data model, is that where you start, or where would you start if you were a revenue leader?
From a theoretical perspective, you would start with the data model. From a practical perspective, the stage we're talking about where this starts to become an issue or actually an opportunity to really leverage data, companies have already implemented tech stacks, right? So then it's effectively, okay, we've got the tech stack we have. Now let's design a data model. And we have we have subconsciously created a data model because we have set up this tech stack, right? So there's stuff in there being measured, but let's ignore that for a second and let's consciously design a data model that we know would surface the information that we as revenue leaders need to be able to manage this stuff very precisely and very efficiently, et cetera. Then do a gap analysis. And effectively then what you end up doing is sort of reconfiguring your tech stack. And this does not generally require you changing out the tools. I mean, in some cases, potentially you're using a entry-level CRM. And so it does not have the capability of doing some of these automations that would be necessary to really maintain continuous integrity, right? But by and large, most people aren't in a position where they need to change out their tech stack. It's more that they need to refine the way that it's implemented so that it's supportive of these of the conscious data model. Instead of the subconscious data model that just sort of evolved over time. So data model is absolutely critical, and it's first from a theoretical perspective, but then it probably has to practically be implemented based on what's already been purchased.
That makes a good point. That if you're a growth stage company, at least you probably have some tools in place. You make a good point, though, that you don't necessarily have to throw away your entire tech stack just because you have somebody coming in, and they've used a different tool. Kind of evaluate whether that tool is useful, and maybe if you can, like you said, optimize it versus just throwing it in the garbage and getting a whole new brand CRM for the sake of it and for spending all that money. So interesting. I love the conversation around this infrastructure, these kind of 3 steps and 3 layers that you can keep in mind in order to grow at a scalable way. So thanks, Scott, for that great information. If you are kind of dealing with the challenges of you have a tech stack and you haven't really thought about a conscious data model, I encourage you to check out scalematters.com/assessment. We've actually put together a complimentary RevOps data integrity assessment for you to try out. And if that's of interest to you, go to scalematters.com/assessment. Until next time, thanks, Scott. I'm Heather. Thanks for joining us in the data room.
Thanks, Heather.